Hi, I'm Ricky Bobby.
And I'm Cal Naughton Jr.
Let's talk about children reading too early.
Got my eye on the three of you guys. For one thing, you're out of this game. I run a clean game here. I have any trouble, I'll suspend. I'm looking out. Stop!
Bobby Orr behind the net to Sanderson. Orr! Bobby Orr! Scores for the Boston Bruins! Have won the Stanley Cup!
I'm Ricky Bobby.
And I'm Cal Naughton Jr. Let's talk about kids on leashes.
You ain't good enough to lick the dirt off our cleats. Watch it, jerk. Shut up, idiot. Moron. Scab eater. Butt sniffer. Puss licker. Fart smeller. You bob for apples in the toilet. And you like it. You play ball like a girl.
Anyone ever tell you look like a penis with a little hat on?
White men can't jump.
We've all wondered what gasoline tastes like. Don't drink it.
This crowd has gone deadly silent. Cinderella story, out of nowhere. A former greenskeeper now about to become Master's champion. It looks like I'm a wreck. It's in the hole!
Hi, once again, everybody. I'm Ed Berliner, and welcome into another edition of The Man in the Arena, the sports reporter's version, if you will, where every shot we take is perfect. It makes no difference. Carl Spackler is indeed the greatest golfer in the history of the world, and we all know it. Why? Because we've all been Carl Spackler at one time or another. Don't forget that you can always catch us live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. Make sure you check out our feed and make sure that you know exactly when it is. But usually it's at 3 o'clock Eastern time in the afternoon. When the show's done, you can pick it up on YouTube. All you have to do is go to welcometothearena.com, see every episode there. And as an extra added bonus, don't forget, for those of you just wanting to listen, as you will many times to our guests, all you have to do is go to any of the major audio podcast platforms, search out my name, Ed Berliner, or The Man in the Arena, and go ahead and download to your heart's content. All we ask is that you subscribe. That's right. That's how things are done here in the over-the-top world of internet broadcasting. I have had many guests over the years when it comes to doing sports reporters and panels. I have never quite had a panel like this before, and I am prepared for almost anything, which means I should have had some kind of a libation handy, but I don't. Yeah. It would have been perfect for this, but this is a pleasure to do because these are two guys that I know very well. I listen to them. They are the best morning show in South Florida, period, end of story, drop it, get away, stop, because it's just fun to listen to. My first guest is somebody that I have known for about years, when we were both maybe about in age. And it goes without saying that he's been through all the wars in South Florida, as I have as well. And he is just absolutely one of the best at his profession. It is a pleasure to welcome in the man everybody in South Florida knows as DeFo, Jeff DeForrest, who is the headline on the DeFo Show on 940 WINZ, the sports animal, Monday through Friday, 6 to 10 a.m. How'd I do? Did I get everything in there for the promo?
That was tremendous, Eddie B. And I have to say it's a pleasure to be involved in any venture that you're behind because you've been behind virtually every venture that's ever existed in medium. Anytime there was a new
I've been behind it, all right. No, usually I'm in front and I'm getting run over by it by the time it succeeds.
You're the first hire, though. I mean, they opened up a sports network in Guam. There's Eddie B. pioneering the whole thing.
Yeah, that's true. How many
down.
sports networks? Look, I'm either I've got to be either the good luck charm or the kiss of death because, I mean, the ones that I've been with that I've started, where are they now?
It's amazing. Yeah, no, you're foundational in every respect. And the other thing that I greatly admire, and I've known you about 40 years, it seems like. I came here 40 years ago.
Don't tell anybody that.
You were sports director on Channel 6 and did a tremendous job. And I said, who is this guy? He's got a dynamic presence, great head of television hair, huge voice, knows his stuff. And on top of that, I've never seen you in the 40 years that I've watched you or listened to your broadcast. I've never heard or seen you flub a word, which is amazing. And you even did that intro brilliantly, my friend.
Please understand that Jeff DeForrest is one of the great liars of our time. So
well, that's good. Now I could probably get
he's an inveterate gambler, ladies and gentlemen. That's what it is. Now, the guy who has to put up with him every single morning, and not only that, but the guy who makes his life a whole lot easier, because he basically does everything, including helping to set up this interview, because DeFo is about as least technical knowledge of anyone I've ever known. So he's the guy that gets it done all the time. He is the co-host. He is the sidekick. He is the executive producer of the DeFo Show on 940 WINZ, more commonly known as Luby. Mike Lubitz. If I'm going to have DeFo on, I had to have the sidekick on because I think you drive most of that show, my friend. Good to have you on.
I appreciate being included in this realm of legends. I am not even 40. I'm not even 40 myself. So thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to the Eddie B. DeFo experience.
Don't worry about it. Between DeFo and I, we have clothes that are older than you. I mean, that's just the way it works, man. You know, it's just the way it works. We happen to do that, so that's okay. We'll go from there. All right, let's get started because we have so many things to do. And by the way, I'm sure that Luby's going to find a way sometime in this to grief me over a recent Twitterese that we've had back and forth about the Miami Marlins. But don't worry about it because we're definitely going to get there, and I am going to mention the Marlins. But let's start out with, I think, something that we need to discuss, and that is what's happening with COVID-19 right now, and not only in sports but in football specifically in general. Because, guys, what's happening with college football? Look, Baylor now has 36 coaches and players that have been hit with COVID-19. You've got the nut job at the University of Florida in Dan Mullen who says, go ahead, bring in 90,000 people. I don't care. Let's just go ahead and take a shot at being a super spreader. But do we not have to say that, look, college football has failed in so many ways in this? Some of them get it right, but this is dangerous as hell. I mean, to do this just doesn't seem as if there was a whole lot of brain power put in it. What do you think?
Well, it's going to be difficult. I mean, you have to applaud the NBA. They managed to get through it. They didn't have a single positive test or any kind of incident other than Lou Williams leaving the bubble to go get wings at a strip club in Atlanta, which I heard the wings are great there. So I can't really fault the man for going in that direction. I mean, he couldn't have gone to Wings Plus down the street there in Orlando. That might have worked out okay. But they managed to survive and put on a pretty good show, I thought, without any kind of incident whatsoever. But they were in an enclosed bubble that they had great control over, and they didn't let anybody leave or come in without immense scrutiny and testing, and it worked out. Same thing in your beloved sport of hockey, Eddie B. I was kind of surprised they were able to get through it like they did. It was a shame that the Stanley Cup playoffs, which I'm a huge fan of, and I know you are.
No,
don't.
I
had to go and do the family thing, and that probably cost your Bruins a shot to win the championship, although it was exciting and very compelling action. They managed to get through it without any incident. You knew it was going to be more difficult and very prohibitive in baseball and sports that are played outdoors where there was going to be travel. And it was already a huge influx of college students testing positive that weren't involved in sports. So they threw those guys off the campus. And, of course, because it's not all about the money, they told the football players,
hang on. I'm going to stop you there. It's not all about the money? Come on.
Oh, we know that. I'm being facetious.
Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure that you hadn't actually gone off on a limb somewhere. You know, you scared the hell out of me.
Off the day you put my head on the bottom. No, I mean, the only reason they're doing this is for the television money. There's no virtue involved in this thing. It's not like they're helping kids better their lives by inflicting the possibility on them of getting COVID-19 and giving that to their family and the wild spread that's going on right now. It's reckless and careless in a lot of ways. Was it worth giving it a shot? Maybe, but it doesn't seem to be working out so well. And we're starting to see it unravel a little bit in the NFL. So you're wondering when that final domino is going to fall. They did have an abundance of incidents, including with the Marlins, with COVID-19 in baseball. Somehow they've survived that and gotten to the point now where it seems to be a little bit under control. And we have the championship series being played, and eventually the World Series looks like it's going to come off. But was it worth a try? Maybe. Does it work? I'm not sure that it does, but seems to be edging the other way right now with all the different incidents we're having and cancellations.
Well, here's the thing, Luby, I'll throw this to you. Is it worth it, Baylor having 36 coaches and players infected, and a coach at Florida who wants to expose 90,000 people to it, perhaps, which we got to give credit to the university president who tamped down Dan Mullen right away. Although Mullen's come back after the president's statement and said, I still want 90,000. All he's doing is making up for a lousy upset loss. But what does that say
voted for DeSantis, by the way, Mullen.
College coaches who should be more concerned about the athletes themselves, and they don't? DeFo's nailed it. It's about the money, and that's why everybody started. It's not like that everybody started to play again in the Pac-12 and the SEC and the ACC because it's such a wonderful sport. No, come on. They want the money. Let's be honest.
Well, it's, first of all, and we joke with Tony Segredo, who also is a legend like yourself down here in South Florida, because he'll talk about the passion and the love and the learning it. And we're like, Tony, no, it's about the money. We know it's about the money. They haven't hid it. It's about the money. My favorite part is So college football, of course, some stadiums let people in, some don't, and they'll say there's 25%. It's like 80,000 people at Texas A&M Stadium. They're holding each other. There's no masks. Like, it's a big joke. And the funny thing is, the NBA did it so well, NHA did it so well, baseball sort of mucked through it, that you knew football was going to try, but it's like there's no law. It's like the Wild West with football. Like, we're going to let people in. Okay, so then why wouldn't you, like, rope off where they sit? Don't you have control on where, like, you get a ticket. Like, why wouldn't you? Well, no, they don't care. Like, it's all a game. It's all bullshit. And to be brutally honest, it's never been about the kids. We haven't even had the Big Ten and the Pac-12 start. You think the Big Ten is going to be – the Midwest is a disaster right now with COVID.
That's
like,
because the Big Ten is being told, as many schools are being told right now by the medical professionals, don't do it. It's just not the smart thing you do, and that's why Baylor is now stuck. So what does that happen? Baylor doesn't play. Other teams can't come in and play. Who knows who else they exposed? That's all part of this, and people don't seem to worry about it that much. Don't worry, it's like the flu. Can't we just get past this nonsense at least?
I'm looking forward to it, though. I have a couple for the LSU game. And I can't wait to get up there to Ben Hill Griffin Stadium. Be among 80,000 slobbering, toothless Gator fans who are all screaming, hoping that they can peel themselves off the mat from last week's bludgeoning at the hands of no less of a coach than Jimbo Fisher, a guy that left Florida State bereft of any talent whatsoever while he made off with $20 million. And that's all part of it, too. Who's making the money in college football? It certainly isn't the players. And I can't wait to be there in that environment and start yelling and screaming, "Go Gators!" See if I can improve.
You realize, of course, our good buddy Stu Opperman is going to hammer you for this when he sees this. You know, a lot
That's
of the
we understand
big Gator guys are going to walk in here and hammer you for this. But no, it's the money. And look, I love Tony to death, but stop with the nonsense. This is all about the money. You're putting people at risk, and it doesn't necessarily have to be. And we all know sitting here that the bubble is going to be a one-shot deal. It's not going to happen again because these teams in these leagues can't get along without the cash. Yeah, they get the TV money, but the fans want to be able to go to the games. And if you can't give them their tailgates and their arenas and their chance to be there, eventually they're going to find something else. There goes that shot to Netflix, and Hulu is where everybody's going these days, and they're doing it now.
Yeah. Seems to be a very clever decision on the part of Ron DeSantis to allow massive amounts of people into small areas confined where you can barely squeeze in there to begin with. And so why not just open it up at the worst time when the pandemic is coming back on again? And doesn't it seem like this thing should be gone by now if we followed any kind of reasonable protocols? I think most of the people that are following the science...
You're being way too reasonable, young man. You got to stop that right now.
Well, and, I'm reluctant. I have tickets for a Dolphin game, and I know doesn't a Dolphin crowd, they were allowing supposedly 13,000 in, which would seem like already a little bit too much for me, because you all have to go through those very narrow entrances and security and all of that stuff. It's not just spreading out in the stadium. You're getting together and squeezing your way in there at the beginning of the game, whether they stagger it or not. So seems a little bit unsound, but you would have thought it would have been over by now. I think the NFL was thinking that this thing would have been long gone by the time they got to July. And the crowds at Hard Rock Stadium, you've been to a few of these, Eddie B. I know you've been waiting around. And
look what you did. You went off on a tangent somewhere, and you made Luby leave, for crying out loud.
What happened on the show the other day? He went to the men's room, and we thought we got knocked off the air, so we shut it down and came back on. Talk about technical
men's room breaks are not allowed in the show. Don't you guys know that? It's not like he got records to play. You can't put on the 13-minute version of Led Zeppelin's Stairway to Heaven live and just walk to the men's room, okay?
Lock yourself in the studio and try and negotiate a new contract. You won't come out until they give you more money. But
not
you've been down there in the preseason games. I mean, late at night when you were anchoring the news sportscast, and you had to wait till the game was over, and they had a 2-hour rain delay and a lightning delay, and then you're sitting there and you're wondering, wow, who are these 4 fans that actually stayed to the conclusion of this 4th preseason game? And that's what the crowds look like right now at Hard Rock Stadium. So I'm thinking if it's like that towards the end of December, I might go to the Patriot game that I have tickets for, because otherwise the Mustang might kill me. It would be like if you had tickets to see the Bruins in the same circumstances existed, you'd be probably inclined to go.
When this whole thing broke, I was just happy because the Bruins came to play the Florida Panthers, and it was before COVID hit. I don't know what the hell I would have done had the playoffs walked around and it would have been the Panthers against the Bruins. I said, look, I'm not going to Toronto, but the TV was on. I mean, look, I'm the loyal fan that wants to be there, but I still want to be at the game experience. The other thing in the National Football League that caught me here with the whole COVID-19 thing is there's now a report out on Deadspin, which was once dead and now has come back. And they are the same snarky website as they always were. But I got to be honest, they're actually doing some pretty good reporting every now and then, and they really pull no punches. Where they're talking now that a lot of the NFL players are terrified of COVID-19, but they're not saying anything because they know damn well that there will be repercussions, and the league is basically forcing them down, telling them to play. So, guys, don't we have to be concerned as we would be in any sport right now, college football, the NFL? Look, there have been reports already that a lot of colleges have been, and high schools, have been hiding their test results and making sure that everybody tamps it down. We really don't know, to be honest, because I think it's fair to say that the NFL and others could very well be hiding a lot of the test results because, again, it's all about the cash.
Well, DeFo brought up a name that when you do terrestrial radio, you're supposed to watch the names you say, but we're on the Eddie B experience, so we're not. Governor Ron DeSantis,
brother.
Well, Governor Ron DeSantis is like freewheeling. He's just open about everything, and he wanted the Dolphins to have the entire world there. And I give the Dolphins and Hard Rock Stadium a lot of credit with the Gators, which is rare, to limit their people. But we've never known the numbers from the beginning. Governor Ron DeSantis openly said, "This is what's the best about our world today is, look, we're all used to politicians lying. I love when they tell you the truth that they're being scumbags." He said from the beginning, "Yeah, I'm not going to tell you the numbers." Ha ha.
Well, so the numbers have been delayed, too. That was another thing. Last weekend, and we're doing this show live on Tuesday, October 13th. Last weekend, a lot of the numbers from Florida didn't even come out. And that's the governor's office who basically says, well, we've got some other things to check. Oh, come on, bullspit. You just don't want to throw it out there because you don't want to look bad. And that, I think, is what's happening with a lot of the sports leagues as well.
If we don't know the numbers in the public eye, we for sure have no friggin' clue what the numbers are with the NFL. There's no way they're releasing the numbers. So I totally understand where the players are coming from. And look, like with concussions, I think they are liable to make sure the players know what they're playing under. And if they are withholding numbers, then that's criminal.
But they've done it because you just brought up concussions and you brought up the whole CTE issue. We didn't know that for what? Decades. That players were involved in. The players themselves didn't know, they weren't told. So I think that's why the players, and Deadspin, I think, has got it right, that they're terrified about this because there's a lot of guys who don't want to get sick. And look, there's a lot of coaches who are in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. You got to be worried for them, too. That's happened where you've had some coaches, where Kansas City had a coach that basically came down with COVID-19. But because, and this, I got to tell you guys, this is what it caught me, where the NFL and Kansas City came out and said, we contact traced and discovered that the coach did not have any contact whatsoever with anybody else down the line that could have led him to the players. Wait a minute. A coach doesn't have enough contact with players and everybody else? What ridiculous nonsense. They really must believe that we're falling for this, and I guess a lot of people did.
Hey, if Andy Reid hasn't gotten it yet, that's amazing. I mean, he's shoveling Chinese food in his face behind that plate chart there, which I think is a menu for Woe Hop, which is located out of Wichita. But, the NFL has tried to be careful, I think. I don't know that they're going to succeed. We're seeing a lot of postponements now and delays.
Well, that's it, DeFo. They haven't succeeded because look what's happened. You've already had to have postponements and cancellations, but postponements instead. When you do that, the whole schedule gets screwed up. Now, there are people who are going to say, come on, they're professional athletes. They're going to play anyway. It's not the way things work because football players are set a certain way. Here's the week. Here's the bye week. Here's what you do. Here's what you do to get ready. The whole schedule has been thrown into an entire mess. And not only that, but I'll bring up the Patriots, for instance. If you have, and not because I covered the Patriots for years, but because you take out the number one quarterback in Cam Newton. And because the league made the decision to play, and because the tracing and the testing isn't working properly, or some knucklehead, maybe like Newton, just throws it out the window, what have you got? A team then is supposed to play without one of its best players. That changes the competitive balance of the game, the league, and as we get down towards the playoffs itself. COVID has changed the game, but no one wants to admit it.
Well, and it's great, too, because I have the Patriots under 10 and a hook. So that was a very favorable development for me.
I really was expecting you to get betting into this show in less than 20 minutes, but good for you, brother.
Well, and the other thing you mentioned is one of my favorite aspects of all sport, and that is the hidden tests and the hidden test results, whether it was the classroom work of certain players that, you're in college and the star basketball player hasn't attended a class in 4 years, but somehow he's acing all of the courses and is on the dean's list. And then there was always Dennis Erickson's drawer with the Warren Sapp tests, which, somehow were undiscovered as he had all these positive marijuana tests. And that drawer was as hard to crack as like Mel Fisher trying to find the Atosha. It was unbelievable how those went hidden forever. So
people have to understand that DeFo brings in some of the greatest references that are basically 20 and 30 years old, but hell, we love them.
Got to do some research, to follow the show. That's what it's all about. Look, I don't blame him for trying. We have a guy that comes on our show as a sports agent, and he is constantly claiming that he thought this was a horrible idea, and no preseason was going to hurt a lot of players, which it did. It didn't give a lot of players a chance to make the squad that normally would have been in the NFL. It was a big compromise. But I would say this, Eddie B., it goes back to The Godfather and Michael Corleone. Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in. And I was okay. 4 months without sports, a lifetime sports fan. Since I was in diapers, I was calling games in the bathtub when I was 5 and doing the anthem and the entire stadium introductions. I've loved sports my whole life. 4 months without it, I thought, you know what? I'm doing okay. I read a book.
Yeah.
I went to the beach with the wife. We made some dinner together. And now that it's back and in abundance where you have action, 3-4 different big games a day, I couldn't be happier. It's like I returned to my childhood. So I'm addicted to it. I like it as entertainment. If they tried and failed at the risk of people's health, not a great idea, but I don't know that it wasn't worth a try at least. And it seemed like they tried their best to see if they could accommodate the necessary safety protocols, and it just may not work.
But let me play devil's advocate for just a second here, because we're talking about test results in college football, in the NFL, in other sports.
It's more egregious in the colleges than the pros, I believe, because those guys are just students and supposedly, and they're not getting paid, and they're getting ripped off, and it's all their work that's going into generating this TV money that's not going back to them, except in the form of a scholarship, which we know that was an archaic principle.
We could do a whole show
like
on that.
Second Amendment, what was written when people were carrying muskets. Okay. The NCAA
Wait a minute, hang
stipulations.
on. I still want to get to the devil's advocate here on all this, because we're talking about test results and being told by the leagues and the teams. The other side of this says, why should you tell us? Why should we expect anybody to tell us? What's the big deal? They're private entities. They're trying to protect their players and athletes. What the hell do we as fans deserve to know why somebody tested positive for COVID-19? What's the big deal?
They did give the players the option to opt out on the college and the pro level without really incurring any penalties of any sort, as far as I know. I don't know what the pay would have been.
Why should we need to know?
I don't know. I mean, it's a public health issue also. So, I mean, I think there is some credibility there.
I think, first of all, the players need to know. So if you're telling me they're hiding it from the players, that's my problem. That's where it's criminal to me.
One problem, yes.
I want to know if Luby has it.
Yeah, I don't have
I want to know you got it, kid.
But, okay, but the question is, though, as fans, why should the fans expect to be told? What's the big deal here? Why should we expect to be told who's sick and who's not? We don't get told under any other circumstances. If somebody breaks a leg, then we're told because it takes a player out. But why should we be told?
They didn't really name everybody in baseball, though, when these COVID-19 tests all turned up positive for the Marlins. They just said 18 players. And then there was speculation, and I guess through reporting, people found out who some of them were. So I don't know. It's like the injury report where Tom Brady always showed up as doubtful, but which we know that if you weren't deceased, you were playing. But, yeah, I guess, it's trying to be straight up. I think they try to be straight up about it. I don't know, like I said, that it's necessarily going to work because we're seeing problems. But I think they tried, in all sincerity, to make it work as best that they could. The pros obviously getting paid. They had the option not to play. They gave them that choice. So I don't know they can really blame them for trying.
What do you think, Luby?
As upset about that as some people are.
Well, what I was going to say is the man who we have, and I do a show with every day, gambling is probably a big reason why the public should know, because gambling runs the NFL.
What I was afraid to say, Eddie B.
DeFo was not talk about
DeFo
that.
won't say that, but he won't go there. But you're exactly right. That's the only reason.
I'm not the court, that's for sure.
I guess it's an ankle or a knee, we can tell, okay, this team's going to be booked for 2 weeks. For COVID, we don't know. COVID could be 1 game, 2 games, 3 games. So I guess if you are trying to keep the public honest when it comes to gambling, you do need to know what the injury is, so you know what you're going to do with this team versus that team. And when you do, they name every other injury. They don't hide when it's an ankle, unless it's Brady. Most injuries, we know what it is. This is an injury in a sense. They're missing action. Then why would we treat it any differently?
Well, except you're in the National Hockey League, because they'll say upper body injury, lower body injury. Look, Steve Stamkos was out for months, and nobody really knew. They just claimed that it was an upper body injury. But you're right.
You've been decapitated. They called it that.
It's all about the gambling issue, which then brings me to something else that I wanted to bring up here, which is going to be near and dear to DeFo's heart, and that's fantasy sports. I truly believe that, well, first of all, fantasy sports is indeed a form of gambling. There's no doubt about it. Has been for a long time. To me, fantasy sports is the reason why there is now this major disconnect between the fan and the player. Look, it used to be that we watched sports because we wanted to see the beauty of the game. We wanted to watch the wonder of baseball itself, the football, watching the players, the great athletes, hockey, the same thing, basketball makes no difference. In my opinion now, it is more than ever before about people watch the games and they get pissed when they don't know or when a player misses a shot. Why? Not because they love the player, but because you just screwed with my over-under and you're going to cost me money. And oh yeah, by the way, you're no longer part of my fantasy team now because you suck. So instead of my enjoying the game for the game, it's now about how much money can I make off the player. To me, fantasy sports has completely destroyed the relationship between fan and athlete. Totally.
It's possible. I'm not a fantasy player. I do believe this, though, Eddie B., and I think you know my good friend, the Paulie Man, who's been with me on the Trivia Challenge shows we do for 25 years, and I've known the guy 40 years. We were just born at the wrong time because of the sick degenerates that we were as kids growing up in New York City, especially, where we gambled on virtually everything. We couldn't do anything without having money on it. We would have killed it because we knew every statistic and every trend and every pattern that was going to happen in sports, but they didn't have fantasy sports back then, and now it's kind of too late to get into it. I would think that, you could have just killed it if you were the same type of sports fan that we were, so passionate about knowing everything, and you knew all the stats on the back of the baseball cards, and you knew what people's shooting percentages were. To this day, I carry a grudge against Howard Butch Comize of the New York Knicks for shooting 36% from the floor when he was supposed to be a lights-out shooter at Bowling Green. So we would have killed it on fantasy sports. It would have really been our cup of tea, but I just never really got into it that heavily. And it is interesting because, and this is a topic for another day, I guess, but if you have money on a game, and now you're seeing it with the fantasy players even more so because it's expanded so much, you become exceedingly more racist, exceedingly more intolerant with each passing play as the clock winds down. And you start saying things that you would never be inclined to say.
I can't argue with him. He's right. He's right. But it's also, look, what you're saying, though, is also part of gambling. I mean, there used to be a simple gamble every now and then, but now gambling has reached such heights where the leagues themselves now not only allow it, but they want you to gamble on the games. They're part of it. Look, we come from a time when if you mentioned gambling around baseball or the National Football League or any other sport, horrors. I mean, you'd be jacked out of the locker room in a second. There's no discussion of it. Now, the leagues themselves say, come on, gamble on us. Go ahead, spend your money. Here's a way to do it through DraftKings and all these other fantasy. It's all gambling, man. That's the point. We don't love the sports for the sports anymore. There's a lot of people out there who love the sport because it makes me money. That's it.
Well, and beyond that, though, and Louie, I know you want to address this, but I will say this, and it's a lesson for all the kids that watch Ed Berliner and this outstanding podcast every day, and that is if you put even $5 on a game, it so greatly enhances your interest in that game. You can't believe it. Every pitch becomes of paramount importance.
But it shouldn't be that way. That's
wrong.
Monumental.
Every coaching decision is going to be scrutinized like you were looking at documents as if you were just seated on the Supreme Court, although that's a whole other thing, too. But
no, don't go there. No, please, no. Stop. No, don't go there.
But it does. It really does enhance your interest. I found it to be true. I'm not a big sports bettor. In spite of reputation, I've been, I know you don't love the sport of horse racing, but I'm not sending in thousands of dollars on games. I like to have a little action here and there. But it really does. It greatly enhances your interest in the ball game and the way it's played, and you'll remember every single play that transpired.
Okay,
if you have it.
so Luby, you're the kid in the whole group here. Am I just an old man telling people to get off my lawn?
Well, no, it's funny you say, because the way we view sports has changed even from my childhood, because I'm attached to teams. I root for teams. I like the players on my team. The minute they leave my team, I could give a shit about them for my team. So, but it's funny, fantasy makes you more about your fantasy team and the player. I do find younger fans, even in their 20s, you don't have the identification to teams like I did. I lived DeFo, maybe not as much as childhood, but like I lived that with my Heat, with my Knowles, with the Dolphins. People don't. Like the younger audience doesn't. It's more of it's not as tangible. It's like this number. They're just a number to me. They're not really a person they don't idolize players like they used to when I was growing up. They idolize shoes. They're big on shoes and they're big on fantasy. They're not big on the player. So I don't know if it's good or bad, but it's interesting. It is changed a great deal from.
Well, I think a lot of that comes down to that the players over the years became less accessible because, and I remember the time, and DeFo was there too, as far as the locker rooms are concerned, there was a change when you could go in and you could talk to the players, and the players would talk to fans, and the players would allow the fans in. Look, you go to spring training games, and they would be lining up down the left field line to get autographs, and the players were there. The stars were there. Then there came a time when you had people going in for autographs. Why? They didn't want to get the autograph of Dave Winfield or Reggie Jackson or anybody. They wanted to get it so they could sell it. And the players came on, and the players got smart to it. They saw that their names were out there. They said, look, I'm not going to sign anymore. So then they had signings where you had to pay for it, or you had maybe 10 people were allowed in. But that started the whole run where the players said, you're making money off me, and I'm not going to allow it. That's why I'm here. And I think that's what happens today. We have a lot of players out there, athletes, I'm talking in every sport, who say, look, you really don't give a damn about me. Your fantasy team is important, your over-under is important, and you want my autograph because you're going to go out and sell it somewhere. Why the hell should I care about you? That's a reason to me why we don't, and Luby, to your point, I think there's been that disconnect where the players don't give a damn anymore about really wanting. There's a few, but they don't really give a damn about wanting to be close to the fans because they feel they're just being used by the fans anyway.
I'll say this. First of all, it's startling to find out Luby has a child, which I was unaware of. I know the guy 10 years plus. So, one thing, and you did a lot of sports talk shows, and you would get some kind of edict from the sports director if you weren't the sports director yourself or the program director, and they would say, well, you know what, and this was in the beginning of fantasy when it was first taken off. And I was not a fantasy guy, and I thought these segments were a complete waste of time. Johnny would call in from Miramar and say, hey, should I play so-and-so or so-and-so? And I thought it was just dreadful radio.
I didn't allow them. I hung up on them. They weren't allowed on the show, period, end of story.
But I'll say this, in terms of, it's not just a totally wasted endeavor, because as I was listening to some of these analysts that were so-called experts that would come on the show to promote the fact that they had other shows and could sell you information or whatever the heck it was that the station wanted you to abide by, and go ahead and promote and sort of castrate your integrity in the process, you would listen to this analysis, and there was some in-depth analysis to actually playing and making fantasy decisions. And I thought if you were going to have a guest on that was going to analyze the game, some guy who's a color guy for the Buffalo Bills, and he was going to preview the Dolphin game, well, he was essentially going to be doing the same thing, maybe less specifically than these fantasy guys were doing, about saying, well, what about Thurman Thomas going against the Dolphins defense? And so there was some element to it which actually involved some kind of in-depth sports analysis that could possibly enhance your enjoyment of the game, but not everybody's playing it on that level. So as much as I was opposed and appalled by the whole idea of having fantasy guys on shows, and you had some people that really embraced it because I just thought it was useless and not conversational, too specific to one guy, that there was some kind of analytical value in it overall that I eventually became to not necessarily embrace, but at least accept.
I think the analytical side of it is fine, but there's the passion of the game. I mean, Joe Morgan recently passed, and Joe Morgan, just watching him, the seamless moves at second base, the way he played the game, the passion he had for it, listening to him later as an announcer. Whitey Ford. I mean, yeah, I realize the guy was 91 when he passed, but there was a passion to watch Whitey Ford. When I watch the Bruins, I'll watch the Bruins play, I'll watch David Pasternak. I don't care what his over-under is for the game, what his plus-minus is. I don't care. I want to see a great athlete get out there and play, which is why I love watching Jimmy Butler play for the Heat. What an amazing athlete it is to watch. And I'm more interested in that. I don't see that anymore. I see us as being the old guys telling people to get off our lawn. Luby, you're the younger guy, and you maybe see it differently.
No, you are right. I side with you. I watch it for the action, but the younger generation doesn't. And it has a lot to do with attention span. Like, look, it's why.
What'd you say?
Not just
what? What? Oh, I'm sorry.
Baseball, even people. DeFo's growing up with baseball. DeFo tells me all the time he doesn't sit and watch an entire baseball game. When was the last time you watched a baseball game from beginning to end? And baseball was my first love when it came to sports. And even I don't know if I watched from first pitch to bottom of the ninth, 3 outs. I can't. So even us as the older generation struggle. So just think about kids. It's about attention span. What can grab my attention that I can have a personal connection with? My team, my fantasy team, or my bet. And that's why they've grabbed onto gambling so much, because you're right. The team connection doesn't exist like it used to. The pageantry, the passion toward the sport overall doesn't exist. It's personal connection. So they had to create, okay, shit, let's just give in to gambling, because at least that's their pocket, and everyone pays attention to their pocket.
And that's the biggest thing to me, is the fact that it's all gone down to being nothing more than simply just a profit margin. Now, I mentioned the Miami Heat, so I want to make sure we get there, because I think if there's anything we learned before we get into all of this GOAT issue, even if we get there, because I actually had a discussion with Dennis Bernstein and Brad Sesmat on the Sports Reporters yesterday, and we mentioned GOATs, and I didn't mention one name, and Dennis Bernstein said, Ed, Bill Russell's on the line. He wants to talk to you right away. And I thought that was brilliant if you're going to talk about a GOAT. But let's talk about the Miami Heat for a minute. To my view, if you will, just looking at what they've been over the last 5, 10, 15 years. Guys, this is the model for an NBA franchise. The way Pat Riley and Andy Ellisberg and the people there have created this franchise, it is what you want every franchise to be in how they approach players and fans and deal with us and deal with everything around them. But not only that, Erik Spoelstra is undoubtedly the most underrated coach in the National Basketball Association. Because look what he's done, putting these teams together. It's not that he puts them together, but he's got to hold it. He's the glue. If you don't have that guy on the floor that makes everybody happy, then the team goes to hell. So the franchise side of the thing, and Spoelstra being here, I wanted to get your take on this, because I'm a big fan of those two things with the Heat. Culture and Spoelstra, the way he puts that team together.
This is one for you, Luby Brown, to start off with.
I was waiting for DeFo to call me out, because up until the last 4 years, I was as big a Heat Riley guy as anyone. The last few years, I got into that idea of you got to tank, because losing or being mediocre isn't going to get you anywhere. You saw the Thunder draft a Durant and a Harden and a Westbrook and win because they were really bad. You saw the Sixers be really bad and got two pieces that seemed to be as guys, and Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. And the Heat seem to be in this pattern of, we have a lot of old guys, we have a lot of bad contracts. We're in that 8th, 9th seed. We're not getting any. Well, this year really showing a light on how well they're run, and the fact that you don't have to tank, and the fact that if you handle things properly within the organization, you can constantly win, which hasn't really happened before. It's like outside of the Patriots and the Spurs, most organizations go through rebuilding every few years. They just naturally cycle out with the salary caps. The Heat haven't, outside of this. Riley felt pressure because Chris Bosh had blood clots, so he signed a bunch of contracts. He'd have constantly been good and constantly rebuilt on the fly. And this year they did it again. And I think Spoelstra has a lot to do with the roster. You said it first and then you corrected yourself. You were right the first time. Spoelstra, from what I know, is involved in player selection and development. Spoelstra is probably the most underrated coach in all of sports, because he won early with LeBron and Bosh. But he's not Phil Jackson. He actually won before, because that team before was ass, and they did have a 5th seed and were interesting that year. And he's won since. The one with this year should not have been more than a 6 or a 7 seed. And they were in the finals, down 2 of their best players, and took LeBron and AD to 6 games. what Erik Spoelstra has done is transform himself into a guy that just goes about his business, learned from Riley, and is amazing at his job. And the Heat with Ellisberg, with Riley, with Nick Harrison, and Spoelstra have 4 guys that work in lockstep, which is what all the great organizations do. DeFo and I joke around about the idea of culture. We ask everyone about the culture because we think it's sort of funny, but the players, everyone says the same thing.
Nobody gets unhappy. See, that's just it. In a situation like that, you and I, and look, I think the 3 of us know that, at least I think this, the NBA is filled with the biggest babies in sports.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you need more diapers in that locker room than you have in a warehouse full of Pampers. But if you're able to put it all together, as Riley and Ellisberg and Spoelstra has, and you keep peace on the roster, that's the important thing. Nobody gets upset and nobody screams and hollers. And how many times have we seen that on NBA teams where you have superstars do that?
I'm just hoping Eddie B and Luby knows this of me, that on Judgment Day, that big rabbi in the sky says, I forgive you for ever doubting that Pat Riley still had what it takes to put together a caliber team.
You're one of them, aren't you?
And I've been a big Riley fan. I was around when he first became the head coach of the Lakers. I was working at a small newspaper in L.A., and I remember I wanted to do a feature on Chick Hearn. At the time, Pat Riley was very briefly the color analyst on the radio broadcast for the Laker games, and then there was a coaching mutiny there, and they decided, hey, out of nowhere, Pat Riley became their head coach, and the rest there is history, as he started the Showtime Lakers and had a brilliant coaching style. His own persona was even larger than anybody could imagine in terms of being a star in a star-driven town like Los Angeles. He was maybe the biggest of them all. You had all the flashy people coming out to the court, and the style of play was just brilliant. Goes to the Knicks, and all of a sudden you needed a metal detector to let the players into the locker room because who knew they were carrying like foreign objects during those brutal series with the Miami Heat, and Riley was at the front and the forefront of all of that. And then he comes here, engineers a trade right away for Alonzo Mourning, gets Timmy Hardaway, made a lot of moves. He was a guy that always embraced veteran players, so you were never going to see this Luby rebuild, or so it seemed, until he lucked out, and just by luck of the draw, Toronto wins the last game of the regular season. They decide to take Chris Bosh, who Riley would have taken, and instead they get Dwayne Wade, and he becomes the foundational piece for long-term success for the franchise. He added in all the right pieces with Wade, including later on LeBron James and Chris Bosh, and then it looked like he had hit dire straits. And when LeBron walked out the door, I don't know if you were at that press conference, I wasn't, but I've witnessed it many times. He literally looked like Professor Irwin Corey or some madman. His hair was all disheveled. We never saw
Riley. You just made a reference that I think about 6 people in the audience are going to get.
That's okay. There's the 6 that are paying attention. But nonetheless, he looked like a disheveled shell of himself, Pat Riley, and maybe even a shot fighter. You can appreciate that. LeBron had left him stiffed. We were trying to figure out what was the biggest dump in Las Vegas, so we came up with the Circus as our spot for this meeting that was supposed to take place. He doesn't show up. And Riley was a mess. And then he made a bunch of what seemed like really crippling moves to the franchise. It looked like he was snookered. He signed all those guys that had that great comeback here when they were 11-30 and then went 30-11, and rewarded all of these guys for their grit during that season, which was great. It was a very inspiring team as an underdog team.
Well, you just used a good word, too, grit. I mean, and that's just it. Riley is one of those old school guys who looks for that. You use that word a lot in hockey when it comes down to it, but you find the guys who have the grit, who just want to dig in and they want to win for the franchise. Yeah.
They're an essential part of any hockey team, and they can be. We saw this even with the Lakers. The Lakers maybe were balanced out a little bit with Anthony Davis and LeBron, some of those Jimmy Butler performances, and there was a different guy on occasion that would help out Jimmy Butler with a big game. Duncan Robinson one night had 30 points, and another night it was Tyler Hero. But look what it boiled down to. It boiled down to Rajon Rondo, Alex Caruso, Danny Green hitting a couple of shots in that 6th game. And there was a lot of the surrounding pieces. So those are the kind of guys that make things happen. I think that's why Riley made the move very cleverly for Jay Crowder and Andre Iguodala, because he knew that if he was going to win a title or have a shot or get as far as they did, they were going to need those veteran guys that knew how to dig in there, put their so-called lunch pail on the baseline and come out and play hard. And it looks like he's at least gone from being in no man's land to maybe being one player away from having a winning franchise for a long time to come.
He keeps them competitive keeps the locker room happy, as Spoelstra does, and he keeps the fans happy. Look, the fans are all upset right now, but I didn't hear anybody calling for anybody's head. Yeah, they lost to the Lakers in 6 games. People are unhappy. But, hell, social media was filled with people going, congratulations, Heat, good job, let's go to next season. I didn't read anybody who was really that upset. You know, again, it all came down to the GOAT issue, which is another show we can do on, but I don't see people unhappy because they feel like they're getting their money's worth. Guys, that's the biggest thing that we could do a whole show on, are fans who just want to get their money's worth. And if you look at people who are, they leave franchises like the Mets because the Mets have screwed, blued, and tattooed their fans for how many decades now? I think what fans are saying is, if you want, and here's another thing, I have no problem with people changing their allegiances to a team. I have no problem with that whatsoever. Because if you're a lifelong fan and the franchise doesn't give a crap about giving you a competitive product that you spend your money on, you spend your time on, your passion on, go find somebody who does. Why not? Because that's the biggest thing. Fans want to have passion about their teams, and that's why when you create a team that it's not worth rooting for or that consistently makes bad moves, and you're sitting there every season wondering when you're going to lose next, why be involved? To me, leave. The organizations now with the money involved to fans has a right and a responsibility to make sure they put up the best franchise 24/7, 365.
That's why you see that picture. It's hidden in the background there at Luby's place at Mike Tannenbaum. That was a symbol of futility for a franchise. Look, you want to have faith in your team.
Don't even get me started. We'll go to Adam Gase next, and we'll spend 20 minutes on that disaster.
Well, and I mentioned this morning, and it'd be on our show, that I passed by Hard Rock yesterday, and there was a fumigation truck outside. And I thought, wow, they're really going to extra precautions here because they got this extra game now squeezed in on the schedule that was moved up from week 10 to this week against the New York Jets. And it turned out it had nothing to do with any kind of disinfecting practices that they were involved in. It's just that the Jets showed up early for a walkthrough.
Bingo.
And they fumigate the stadium. So
remember when the Dolphins-Jets was a game we looked forward to every year? I mean, that was the one where you could that's the one where you could get the over-under on how many bottles are going to be thrown and how many fights are going to go on in the stands. Every single game.
It could be great to do talk radio, too. Luby never experienced this, where he used to just throw open a microphone and go, on Monday at 6 a.m., Eddie B., week of the game, and go, Dolphins-Jets.
Boom.
And all the lines would line up, whether you had 5 lines, 8 lines, 20 lines, they'd all be lit the entire time. One guy after another, yeah, the Jets suck. Are you kidding me? We beat you last year. And it was great. And there was a lot more passion, as you said. I think when teams are bad for a long period of time, like the Dolphins have been mediocre, 20 years now since Marino retired. Marlins, unfortunately, for a long period of time under Jeffrey Loria, were a complete disaster. And people doubted that Derek Jeter could do anything about it. So maybe we're seeing signs of life there. That would be nice to know. Because I don't believe Jeter got into this to look like a clown at the end and just walk off with a bunch of money. He paid too much for the franchise, along with Sherman, to put himself in that kind of situation where he would get embarrassed. You're a Florida Panthers, Eddie B. I know you're a Bruins fan, but you'd like to see hockey here prosper.
Yeah,
it would be nice
fan, to period, but I love hockey.
But, I mean, they just made bozoic moves, one after another. It's hard to even describe. Now they're stuck with this goalie who's blind in one eye, Bobrovsky, when they could have been on the free agent market this year for any number of guys that are far better that were had for half the price already.
Hey, look, a bunch of us who are Bruins fans right now are bemoaning the fact that the Bruins haven't done anything as we sit here today, October the 13th, in free agency. In Delaware North, the company that is owned by the Jacobs family that owns the Bruins has just cut off 13% of their workforce in Buffalo. So they're having a money problem. Bruins haven't a free agent market yet.
Delaware North? Aren't they the chicken people?
So no, that's different. That's entirely. They're the concession people, actually. I wanted to make that transition to the Marlins because this will give Luby the chance to go ahead and hammer away because he was. I mean, I don't hear from Lubitz for months, and then all of a sudden on Twitter, I get between him and another guy and a few other people, I get hammered when I make a comment about the Miami Marlins that I don't think they're going to go anywhere. And, of course, I got hit. Oh, well, they're in the playoffs. I'm waiting for Eddie B to go out and eat his words, which I'm not going to do. Because, look, it's okay. It was a fair argument back and forth, and I actually got some private messages from some people who were vile on the whole thing, who said, you're not giving the Marlins a chance. To my opportunity, look, This is a shortened season. It's an asterisk season to begin with. Yeah, the Marlins have great pitching that they put together, but they got past the Cubs that weren't any great shape to begin with. So to me, the Major League Baseball season itself is a little bit cheap because it's not 162 games. It's a COVID season. So I think anybody can win in a COVID season. Luby, go ahead. Hammer away.
Grab your hammer.
Well, DeFo's way more Marlins than I am, so DeFo may hit you harder.
No, wait, but this comes down to you because you came after me on this, and it's okay. I don't mind. I love it.
I don't know why this would be easy. Like, this isn't an easy season. Like, the Marlins historically suck the first, month and a half. So that would mean less games would be worse for them. It's why I laughed when DeFo brought the idea of them winning 25 games. I thought it was hysterical to think that they could win 25 games out of 60. And they lost 18 players, more than half of their roster. Well, they really have no shot to win 25 games.
No doubt they overachieved. You're right.
To me, for them to overcome that wouldn't be less of an achievement. That would be more of an achievement. Like, I understand it's less games, so it's screwy, strange, fine, but doesn't make it less of an achievement. It makes it more impressive because they were a young ball club that wasn't supposed to do anything, lost more than half their roster. It was a weird down there in South Florida where COVID central, so their home life has got to be a disaster. Yet they put it all together to win and make the playoffs. They were above 500. Okay, there were a ton of teams that had ridiculously expensive rosters and were under 500. So, to me, to call that, and I don't call it an asterisk season. It's a weird season. We may remember it.
Well, but that's an asterisk season because it's not 162 games. You're measuring records and playoffs. I mean, the playoffs are straight. I get that. But wouldn't you agree that if you're going to play 162 games on a regular season, that there's ebbs and flows in the season, and that leads to it? And because you play a shortened amount of games in one season, it's not the same. It doesn't lead you to the same conclusion. So to me, you have to put a star by it and say, shortened season, fewer games. Just like I think you would put a star next to any season that's hit with a labor walkout. Same thing.
I'm not a big fan of the asterisk. It is what it is, as the great Dave Wannstedt would say, and others have now said the same thing in other realms. But you know what? No team is hammered. I had the over with a couple of guys, our sponsor deal, Volkswagen. We put up several $1,000s on the over 25. So naturally, we were all in on that. After that first weekend, I'm not sure what the tallest building is in South Florida, but you would have found us all on the roof there, ready to dive off after they went 2-1 against the Phillies and then lost everybody.
It's got to be about a 6-story condo somewhere in Coconut Creek.
People have been screaming, Eddie B., and I'm sure you've been among them, about the length of the baseball season. It seems to me 120 games would be more than enough to satisfy my thirst for regular season baseball. And then if you want to expand the playoffs, fine. I'm not necessarily opposed to that as I used to be. I used to think it would just water it down and cheapen the playoffs. But you have other sports, the NBA and hockey, that have more than half their teams in the postseason. So certainly baseball could afford to expand like they did this year. The players didn't make the situation. They just agreed to go ahead and do it. It was amazing that they were able to bounce back. If you were going to talk about the Heat showing resolve, and any team that you root for that's an underdog team goes out there and overachieves, doesn't have the superstars, that was your Miami Marlins this year. And it's been so long since we've had any reason to cheer about anything involving the ball club, including what looked like a series of just brutal, cold-cut, strict financial moves when Derek Jeter and Bruce Sherman took over the team, and you thought, my God, how could they let this guy go?
Which are the things that drew my ire, quite frankly. It was the front office cuts that actually I got angry about, because the way they were done was like nighttime, let's pull out a guillotine somewhere and drop people in. You don't treat people like that. That's what got me angry.
It seemed that way, but nonetheless, I mean, the guy had an idea, and it had worked for other ball clubs. And it was going to take time, which is always something that fans really don't want to deal with. They're not necessarily going to be patient, especially after all those bad years. But what the guys did on that team this year, they were a bunch of nobodies. They were getting guys like the Dolphins, the last gas stations, and they went out there and they took on some very heavy scheduling problems. In addition to some great teams, they're playing the AL East, which had the Yankees and the Rays could have won 1-2 in the American League very easily. And they happened to square off in a preliminary round in the ALDS. And then they had to go against a bunch of heavyweights in the National League East that were all in it to win it. And had all spent big money and made changes to their roster in the offseason. To go out there and toy with these guys, it would be like you, me, and Luby showed up at the park and took on LeBron, Anthony Davis, and Jimmy Butler, and we won a couple of games. So I thought it was great. It was a great sports story, a real Cinderella story. I'm a big fan of that. Is it a springboard for success in the future? I don't know. With young pitchers, you never know. They show flashes sometime and then go backwards or never really make it. They probably need some home run pop in their lineup if they're really going to be competitive.
They need some
hitting. We see this in the postseason. You need pitching.
Look, I don't root against the Marlins. A little deep. You know, I don't root against the Marlins. I want to see great plays, and I want to see great players, and I want to see great teams. And I really root for the players, especially these young guys in baseball, any athlete really. Because look, get as much money as you can, play as long as you can for whatever you can, because careers are so damn short. If you get a chance, take it. In Major League Baseball, it's even shorter because guys get cut and lopped off with ease. So I love it when these guys come up and they get a chance and they're actually playing for something. That's, I think, what hammered a lot of people with the Marlins in South Florida for years, under the Jeffy Lurie years, because he didn't give a damn. He didn't give a shit if the Marlins won. And I try myself not to use it, but I'm going to use it. He didn't care. It was all about collecting the money for this guy. And I feel sorry because the players are the ones who had to suffer for that.
Greatest baseball or sports Ponzi scheme ever, the Laurie Sampson regime, which is why it's so comical that David Sampson is now a commentator on CBS Sports. Here's a guy, and it never ceases to amaze. I'm sure this is one of your media issues, where guys that have completely buried franchises to the point where they'll never recover in all likelihood, like Mike Tannenbaum, who's now a football expert, telling other GMs what they should do with their team. And you saw it before with Rick Spielman before he became a halfway decent executive with Minnesota, where he was a commentator, and David Sampson going out and criticizing other organizations for the way they run.
It's insulting. It's insulting. It really is. David Sampson is an insult, and it's as much as I respect the people at CBS to put this guy on the air. I mean, you couldn't find anybody else. I mean, he's, quite frankly, Sampson and Luria and the rest of them are con men and thieves. The way that they just absconded with all of that great passion that South Florida could have had for baseball, and they destroyed it. And it's going to take years for it to come back.
Well, and that's why I give this group credit, because I was freaking pissed. Like, DeFo and I talked about it a lot, and we're the home of the Marlins. We have a great relationship with the Marlins, but they've never censored us. And we were honest, like, look, we've been through this 3 times. I don't believe you. Like, you're getting rid of actual talent who's young and outside to stand on affordable contracts for air, because we don't know what prospects are, especially prospects never worked out in trades for the Marlins in the past. So I was pissed. But what I will give them credit for is they laid out a plan and have followed it to a T. They said, we're going to build up the minor league system. It's now from last to third in baseball. We're going to build up the pitching. They now have one of the best young rotations when they bring up Cabrera and Meyer in all of baseball. Okay, so they followed it. We're now, once we do that, going to go and spend at the They did. They went and brought Starling Marte, a veteran, back to try and shore up the postseason run. So at least where Lurie and Sampson talked out of their ass, Jeter and this Michael Hill are very honest. Everything they've said, they've done, and I believe them. So it's like, okay, within 3 years, they had them in the playoffs. That's why I give this run credit. It's hard for me to do an asterisk when it seemed freaking improbable.
Okay, well, I'm going to agree with you on that, on a couple of points in there, and so it's okay. Look, I love the conversation regardless of anything else, man. But the couple of messages I got from Marlins fans were like, brutal the way they were treating it, but I really don't care. All right, we've missed about 90% of the other things that I wanted to talk about, but we've been going for a long time here. So I'm going to give you all a shot, because end of the show here, I like to give everybody what I call the toss-up. Very simple. We've talked about a bunch of things here, and I've thrown out a bunch, so this is your chance. DeFo, I'm going to start with you. Complete toss-up, what's on your mind, throw it out there.
I'm happy to see all of the different sporting events taking place. I have to admit, Eddie B, you can become jaded after years and years. You mentioned there was a kinder, gentler time. I happened to grow up as a member of the media during that period of time where you did get close to people, where you go cover a baseball game. I remember being overwhelmed. I went to cover a game in Anaheim. The Angels were playing. And after the game, a guy told me, this was my first time down there writing for a newspaper. He said, oh, come with me. And after the game, you went into what was a lounge, an open bar, and I'm sitting there chewing the fat with Whitey Herzog, who was managing the Cardinals at the time, and, a couple of guys from the Angels organization. And you thought, what am I doing in this room? It's great. You had great access, and people were terrific. I always like chasing sports stories. You're right about a lot of things. Unfortunately, people don't appreciate that. Maybe that coincides with the demise of the newspaper business. I know it's always disappointing if you were conditioned and schooled in the tenets of what would be good newspaper writing, whether it applied to sports or not, which there were a lot of great sports writers, very brilliant, very eloquent, and very illustrative. You don't see that so much anymore with the stuff that's online.
Well, look,
so
let's be honest, DeFo. It died.
Yeah.
It all died when Sports Illustrated died. When SI became less of a magazine and less of a publication, and they started getting rid of great writers,
brilliant stuff,
really
yeah.
when everything took a dive, and people couldn't care less because it came down to 120, 300 words on the internet and a wealth of many times just con artist fraudulent websites just spewing crap out there because they could. When great storytelling disappeared, that's when sports changed.
Yeah, not a lot of depth to some of these articles. And then, you have your debate shows. ESPN helped the ruination of sports coverage. Even though they do cover sports very well in some ways, they go out of their way to constantly give you a barrage of argumentative debate shows where people really don't have an opinion. You can kind of tell, but they're just taking opposite sides. It was an old sports talk play. You probably got hit with some of this yourself where, you'd walk in and your partner would say, hey, which side of the argument of this do you want? And you say, well, it's my turn to look like a fool. So I'm going to be, I'm going to be the guy that says LeBron James is overrated. Which we've seen a lot of. I mean, it's a ridiculous argument.
Well, it's the Stephen A. Smith thinking process that they have in there. Stephen A. Smith doesn't know. Stephen A. Smith doesn't know jack about sports. He's a clown. He's just an entertainer who screams, and you don't get anything from him other than hot takes, and that's what everybody's about these days. That's where it goes.
Well, and people like that. So, I'm kind of glad that we have our forum, that we actually get very liberal treatment from the people that are upstairs. I don't think they know we're actually on the air, which is a good thing. And, we try to keep it a secret. You notice if you ever come by the studio, we keep the curtains drawn and the door locked so nobody can mess with us. But,
Smart man.
I
think media business these days,
too.
I think you got it. I do think you have it right. All right, Libby, I'm going to toss it to you then. Here comes the toss-up now. You heard DeFo, your turn. Go ahead.
I am excited for the Martin future. I really love what he did and proud. What I want to say, and we haven't been political outside of some parts, but I want to beg people to vote. The world, you brought up COVID. It's a big deal right now. And I don't care what political side you're on. I want people to get out and I want people to vote. I want to see America not be at 50% when it comes to voting. The rest of the world, voting's at 90, 95%, 100% of the population. I think whether it's mail-in, whether it's early vote, which is what I'm going to do myself, or on time, I want you, America, get your ass out and vote. If you're going to bitch and moan, then vote. If you're not going to vote, then keep your mouth shut. Because that's what's great about America. Whatever the hell the idiot is doing in D.C., whatever polls he's closing, whatever the guy in Tallahassee's trying to do, if you really want to vote, you can. And there's like 60%, maybe more in this world don't have that right. So what's great about America, even now, and God willing going forward, is you are allowed to go and vote. Do it. Everyone wants to bitch on Twitter and Facebook and fight and this and that. If you're going to pull a Kaepernick and sit your ass home, then shut your mouth. So while we live in this great country, and it's still great, it was great before, it's still great now, has warts, but it's great. We're 2 weeks out. Get your ass up, go to a poll, and vote. Keep this country as great as it's been and as great as it will be.
I will say this, that I already have received my early ballot. I did the research on it. Took me 20 minutes to research every constitutional amendment. Took me that time to look at all the judges and everybody who was up for election to know who I was going to pick and what they stood for. Put it in the privacy sleeve, put it in the envelope, and the first time that it opens, because my drop-off comes next week, I'm going to walk it. Drive and walk it to the elections office. I'm going to put it in the slot, and I'm going to be happy. So I'm with you. I'm with you completely. It just go ahead and take that. Reminder again to everybody that these are the guys that you hear every morning on 940 WINZ. Shh, even though DeFo doesn't want us to tell anybody, we'll go ahead and tell anyway because that's what we're here for. Come on. It's all about promotion, baby. That's what you got to do. That's where social media is good. Get on your Facebook pages and your Twitter and promote the hell out of this show and all the rest of them, too. That's what we're here for. The DeFo Show is at 940 WINZ-AM in Miami. That's part of iHeartRadio. So if you're around the country, you can also catch it there as well. No reason why you can't listen. At 6 to 10 a.m. in the morning, which means I'm actually up. That's why I listen to it, and I call it the best morning show in South Florida, period, end of story. You want to get a hold of DeFo? On the Twitter, it's at DeFo Show, and Facebook, it's at Jeff.DeForrest to get him there. Also, as far as Mike Lubitz is concerned, look, Mike is the guy who keeps this thing running. Don't let anybody fool you. Without Lubitz, I mean, the DeForrest has a tough time finding the studio at that point. I mean, to get him on this show and to get Skype set up, we had to make sure that there were at least a cadre of people. You should have seen it. There were 15 people behind him before we got the show started who were trying to get everything all set up so they could actually get it started. So, but we did that just for him. And as far as Lubitz is concerned, he is also out there. Twitter is at Lubitz, W-I-N-Z. Facebook is at Mike.Lubitz1, where you can get a hold of him there. Guys, did I miss anything as far as the promotional aspect of the show is concerned?
No, sir. Thank you for having me.
But our new book is out about the show. It's called Death Threat Online 2, and you can find it wherever you can find current literature out there. And it's all about you. Well, you know what that's all about, Eddie B. You took a lot of calls for sports
yes,
talk.
I do. We could do a whole show on the death threats over the time, and the people will get a hold on you and they find out where you live. But now with social media, it's even worse. I mean, thank goodness the block, delete, and report command is now in there in all of social media. It works perfectly. Gentlemen, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time. Don't forget, 6 to 10 a.m., 940 WINZ, the sports animal. That's Jeff DeForrest and Mike Lubitz who are there Monday through Friday. Make sure you listen to them. Guys, we'll do this again. Thanks for being a part of this. Luby, keep DeFo out of the $2 window for a change, will you?
Yeah, we got her.
See if you can. That'll take some time. I thank Jeff DeForrest. I thank Mike Lubitz. I thank you as well. Don't forget, catch us on welcometothearena.com where you can find all of the shows. Go to all of the audio podcast platforms. You can download it there. And don't forget, you catch us live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch as well. For Jeff DeForrest, Mike Lubitz, everybody here, I'm Ed Berliner. Thanks so much for joining us, everybody. Until we meet again, rock on, true believers. See ya! Be sure to stay connected on social media with questions, comments, conundrums, you name it. It's at Berliner Speaks on Twitter, Facebook, and on Instagram. A great place to talk business and learn a lot more about what we do is simply check us out on LinkedIn. Just go there and search out Ed Berliner. A reminder that every single episode of The Man in the Arena is uploaded to YouTube. Just go to welcometothearena.com, or if you're on YouTube, search out Ed Berliner Media. If you would prefer to listen to The Man in the Arena, every episode is available for download on all the major audio podcast platforms. The Man in the Arena is produced by Entourage Management, LLC, and Entourage Media.